Joining me now is Senator Elizabeth Warren, Democrat of Massachusetts. Senator Warren, your thoughts on what the state of California just did in response to Texas?
I endorse what California has done. And like Representative Bryan, I have long supported independent redistricting and that it shouldn't be political, shouldn't be gerrymandered. But right now, given what Texas has done, I applaud California standing up and punching back. It is important that the people of California be heard. Look, let's face it, Texas is afraid of its own voters. Texas is afraid that if they just have ordinary districts that are done by region, that what's going to happen is there are going to be a lot more Democrats, and the Democrats are going to take over the House of Representatives. And so they're doing everything they can to scramble to try to rig the 2026 election. And California has it in its power to be able to push back against that. So I endorse what California is doing, and I very much hope that the people of California support it come November.
You know, part of what's so striking about this is entirely lawful, right, what California is doing. And they're doing it by the laws of their state, which, as you just heard from Representative Bryan, right, he passed the independence districting. They're going to have to go to the people to ratify it, which I do think actually is a crucial difference in Texas. One of the things that's so striking here, though, is, you know, I'm married to an incredible and brilliant lawyer. You're a lawyer. You were a law professor. But sometimes there's a little bit of what I call lawyer brain in the Democratic Party. And what I mean by lawyer brain is just like a lot of times it's the lawyer's job in an organization to be like, no, we can't do that. No, that's... And I feel like there's a lot of that sometimes in the Democratic Party. And I do think that this is one of these moments where there's got to be some real creative thinking about lawful, democratically legitimate responses that might be outside the norm to what is being done in an attempt to essentially consolidate a kind of anti-democratic regime.
Yeah, well, that's the real point here, isn't it, Chris? We can't live in a world anymore where we pretend that everybody's playing by the same set of rules, when it's very clear that the Republicans, who are not supported by the majority of people in this country, that those Republicans are determined to rig every rule they can, to break laws, to ignore laws, in order to be able to seize power and to hang on to it. As Democrats, we have a responsibility to fight back and fight back hard. And that's what I love about what California is doing.
And you know, I think you could tell I think it's the right thing to do as well. It's also at the same time, you know, it is, we should be clear here about what I think the Supreme Court and particularly Chief Justice Roberts' court, in what they've done to the Voting Rights Act, in the actions they've taken in a variety of cases, including Russo, which allowed partisan gerrymandering, have uncorked upon the nation, which I think is really not a suboptimal outcome that we find ourselves in.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's a little like what we've watched with money, with Citizens United.
That's a great point.
Right?
Yeah.
And I like the word you picked about uncorked. And everybody kind of said, ooh, that looks like that could be a bad thing when money starts flooding the system. And, oh, my gosh, what we've seen happen now, where a presidential election, the price of it evidently is what, about $250 million that you just buy the person you want for president of the United States and buy the senators and representatives that you want. And the same kind of thing happens when we don't enforce voting laws to make sure that everyone's voice is heard. And let's remind everyone, when you're talking about the points here about law, that's all Democrats are pushing for. We don't want any special advantage. What we want is to make sure that everyone's voice is heard. And if Texas is determined to suppress the votes, in effect, of Latino voters, if it is determined to suppress the votes of black voters, then by golly, we got to find other ways within the law to push back against that. And that's what California is doing.
Yeah, and that is an astute point about super PACs and Citizens United, which is the sort of holding the two things together, which I think most Democrats do, which is that Citizens United was wrongly decided. Super PACs and unlimited spending are a disaster. And it would be utterly insane not to use a super PAC when you're running for president, because you can't essentially unilaterally disarm if those are the conditions of rules that have been set for Democratic competition.
That's right. But the one thing I want to remind everyone is when the Democrats get in power again, and we will, we've got to change the rules. We've got to change the rules on the impact of money in politics, and we've got to pass the Voting Rights Act again and make sure that there is true protection so that every voter in this country gets heard with his or her vote.
That's a very good point, because that idea of what comes next is one that I think about a lot, and sometimes I feel like I come up empty, so I'm glad to hear you have thoughts on this. I want you, Senator, if you'll stay with me, I want to talk about some other ways Democrats are using their power across the country. That's